Hello again to the Customers Who Click podcast. I'm your host, Will Lawrenson. On this episode, I have a guest from one of the biggest brands in the world. Tristan Burns is the analytics lead at Pizza Hut Digital Ventures, and today we'll be talking about one of my favourite topics, conversion optimization. I think conversion optimization is a bit misunderstood and treated as a bit of a luxury by a lot of companies. It's not seen as a key marketing department. It's more of a, we'll do it if we have the resource sort of area. When I talk to other marketers and people in e-commerce, the key things that tend to come up again and again are landing pages and call to actions. And that seems to be what most people think conversion optimization is about. It is, but it's not. A key part of conversion, and this is the part most people understand, is that it's about getting people who land on your website to convert as quickly and as cheaply as possible. However, the bit that they miss out of the thought process is customer value. You also want these people to be converting at the highest value as possible. And by doing this, you're not necessarily aiming for the lowest CPA. You're better off paying $20 for a customer who spends $100 than $10 for a customer who spends $20. You'll probably also find that the $20 customer spends more in the long term, but that's a separate conversation. Anyway, I'll get Tristan on so we can hear about what's going on at Pizza Hut Digital Ventures. Hi, Tristan. Welcome to the Customers Who Click podcast. If you could tell us a bit about yourself, why you do what you do.
Sure thing. First of all, thanks for having me, Will. It's great to be here. So I am the analytics lead at Pizza Hut Digital Ventures. First of all, Pizza Hut Digital Ventures is, as you would be well aware, Pizza Hut is the global pizza brand, and Digital Ventures is their e-commerce solution that we're currently building and scaling out globally in order to create a consistent brand experience across all of the markets in which Pizza Hut operates. So we don't actually make or sell any pizzas, but we are basically in control of the digital experience, optimizing for customers, user experience, all that jazz. So my role at Pizza Hut Digital Ventures is to, first of all, it's kind of twofold, which might be a little bit unusual for a lot of analysts out there. I have the task of being a business intelligence person, so ensuring that reporting is in place for tracking transactions and business performance updates to senior management, letting the team know how we're tracking towards our targets and our goals for the year. A lot of forecasting as well around where we expect to hit, what the market is doing, all that kind of stuff. But probably more relevant to this conversation is my work in conversion rate optimization. So I work with our product teams and our design teams particularly to understand where there are issues in the user experience, friction in the funnel, what might not be optimal for getting the most value out of our transactions and the most transactions out of the sessions that we're getting, and take those issues, we measure them, then we come up with tests and we roll out those tests and hopefully bring some more business to the site. Okay,
yeah, sounds great. So you have kind of complete ownership over the e-commerce side, right?
PHDV, yes.
So Pizza Hut's a franchise model, isn't it? So how do you have to work with the franchisees quite closely to make sure you're promoting promoting what they want to promote? Or
most definitely, yes. So perhaps a little bit more background. Pizza Hut International is the organization that we work for. That's all within Yum. Yum is the largest restaurant group in the world, and Pizza Hut United States is a separate business. So Pizza Hut International represents the remainder of the world. In most countries that are inside PHI, there are master franchisees, and then under them, smaller franchisees. So we typically work with the master franchisee. So in some markets, you have one, maybe two large franchisees that own pretty much every single store, and they have no minor franchisees under them. But then in other markets, and the UK is an example, we have a master franchisee, which is Pizza Hut UK, and then under them, we have many small and large franchisees that own any number of stores. So we typically work with the higher level, and they manage the country, so to speak. So they'll manage operations of the stores, so make sure that there's enough stock in place, that they're hiring enough people to work in the back of house and front of house. They will make sure that there are drivers for each of the stores, and that just that the day-to-day running is smooth. As well, in addition to that, they will run marketing. So that means offline and online marketing. Where we come in is that we run the online component of their entire operation. So we will So while they'll drive the traffic to our sites, once the traffic's on our page, that's where it becomes our responsibility, and we will optimize for success for that part of the business. So we kind of partner with them. It's more, it might seem in a lot of cases to be sort of a vendor relationship, but in actual fact, we're all part of Yum, and we all work together, and we own to an extent the online sales component, and they do everything else. So certainly there's a lot of ideas and input that comes from them, the things that they want to see happen on the website, things that that their business needs to cater for on the site, and also any optimizations that we come up with, any plans and product features that we think are going to benefit business come internally as well. So essentially ideas can come from ourselves or from them as well.
So what does a standard day look like for you?
So there is no standard day, maybe is a good way of putting it. And particularly lately, given that this recording is taking place right in the middle of the coronavirus. Essentially, I would start the day by taking a look at Google Analytics and just seeing that the previous day's transactions were smooth, that they were as expected, that nothing happened with conversion. We would try and find if any services might have gone down, if there were any outings anywhere in the network, and if so, have they impacted transactions? And if they have impacted transactions, I'll need to quickly come up with an estimate of what that has cost us. Yeah, so it's kind of a little bit of finger on the pulse stuff early in the day. And then depending on what day it is and where we're at with meetings and so on, I will generally get down to working with our product team on the stuff that we have on our roadmap. So what are we building at the moment? What data can I support what data can I supply to support whether or not this item should be prioritized? If we have anything that's recently gone live, are we measuring it? How is it performing? Is there anything we need to tweak? And then tests as well. So are there any live tests that I need to check in on? Are there any tests that we're about to launch that need more thrashing out in the hypothesis? Or can I support design on any of the variants? Or if there's copy that needs to be prepared? So all sorts of little things to support new product features and testing. And then towards the end of the day, perhaps that's when Dallas comes online. So that's where Pizza Hut is headquartered. So it becomes a little bit more around meetings and reporting on what we've done and where we're at with all of our efforts.
Okay, so is that with Pizza Hut?
Yeah, so we're part of Pizza Hut International, and they're headquartered in Dallas, Texas.
Is that kind of reporting in, or is it more like just day to day? This is what's going on. What do you think? What are you guys up to? More like a check-in.
Yeah, it's
almost like a stand-up, I guess.
Yeah, that's probably the good way of looking at it. We're within Pizza Hut International, where we basically own the online journey. So there are over 100 markets within Pizza Hut International, and all of them have got their own, to some degree, online experience. Pizza Hut Digital Ventures is trying to roll out a consistent, scalable, single solution across all of those markets, because a lot of those markets that have their own e-commerce solution, those are quite old now, and they've been things that have been around for sometimes 10 years or longer. So we're trying to smoothen that out and working at the top with the largest markets to begin with, and slowly, one by one, rolling out our solution across all of them. So we're a very important piece of the strategy for Pizza Hut International. And as you can imagine, a massive investment for them. So they are very keen to check in on us and where we're at and make sure that we're making progress, and also wanting to know sort of timelines around when a new market might come online. If we're running a test and it's going to improve transactions and conversion, what is the uptick there? Any reforecasting that needs to be done of our expected e-commerce performance, all those sorts of things. They're checking in on us quite often. Related
to that then, how do you go about coming up with ideas and prioritizing tests? Particularly, I think, where, like you said, you've got all these different countries to look at.
So while we do have so many different markets to worry about, probably the important thing is to know that we're quite a small team and we have to be quite lean, which means that prioritization comes down to where can we get the most bang for our buck. In the larger markets, and that will be Japan, the United Kingdom, this is where we really need to look for opportunities to drive transactions. Because if we do, let's say we do the same test in a large market and then the same test in a small market, we're going to get so many more transactions and so much more revenue for a successful outcome in a large market than we are in a small market. And what would be great to have a testing program in place for each of the markets and be able to optimize those individual markets for their customers. We really have to prioritize larger markets first, and then to an extent allow those smaller markets to inherit the new optimization or the new functionality that we've devised in the larger market. Obviously, just because something has worked in a larger market, that does not mean that it's going to work in a smaller market. So we're very conscious of that. So instead what we do is, if it works in a larger market, we've run a test, we've had a positive outcome, we've rolled out the feature, we've checked that it's clean and that it's continuing to work the way we expect it to. And now we say to the smaller market, maybe to their franchisee, would you like this functionality? It gave us this result in the UK, or it gave us this result in Japan. And if they say that they think that would be a good optimization for themselves as well, then we would turn on that feature to a test and just ensure that it didn't break their conversion or have a negative impact on their sales. If it's clean and it doesn't have a negative impact or anything observable, then we'll probably turn that feature on for that market and they will have it as well. So that's how we prioritize the markets. Now, I think the second part of your question was, how do we prioritize a particular feature?
Yep.
So ideas essentially at PHDV can come from anywhere. Like I said earlier, they can come from ourselves or they can come from the markets themselves. Marketing teams are often a good source of input for ideas because they are speaking to customers so frequently, right? So they have a lot of qualitative insights, whereas our team have the quantitative insights and the ability to look at data and come up with solutions there. So while ideas can come from anywhere, and they kind of come to our product team to be assessed, like, is it something that's possible? And then we will go and measure it. So what is the issue that someone's nominated actually an issue? Are we already tracking it? Is measuring in place that we can quantify how big an issue it is? If tracking has not been set up or is not in place, then we'll go and do that, and we'll run it for a little while, and then we'll pull down the data again and have a look and say, yeah, okay, this is probably a problem. And then the next steps will be to hypothesize on what we might test and how we might go about it. At that point, we'll come back to product and design and come up with, we have our control, but then we'll work out what the variants are and try and devise those. Now, that sounded like it was a pretty drawn out process, but that tends to happen quite quickly. And it's often very scrappy and very lean, and happens with lots of whiteboards and markers, and we come up with solutions pretty quickly, given that the data is there to support that there's something we can do here.
Yeah, I suppose if you've got the right people in place, people who are knowledgeable of the business, then yeah, if someone points out a particular possible problem, everyone can probably quite quickly offer some sort of opinion on it or possible solution.
Yeah, and we're not afraid to iterate. So if we test and a test is not giving us a statistically significant result, then we'll go back to the drawing board and see what else we can do, or we'll roll on to the next step if it's not harmed anything.
Yeah. So I guess two little follow-up questions to that. Do you use much external data, like customer feedback or research, or is most of what you do driven by the data internal feedback?
I think that most of the data that I work with is site analytics, and our UX teams are the ones who are probably more heavily focused on qualitative research and user feedback. We've not been we're a very lean team. You might be surprised to hear that although we are a multinational food company, we're quite small compared to a lot of other tech teams, I would say, out there doing something of a similar scale. particularly in analytics and design, we're very heavy engineering focused, and we try to do our best with the small amount of resources that we do have. So the qualitative side of things, it definitely could be a little bit more robust. We try our best to reach out to customers when we can, and underline what they're saying and try and receive ideas from that. But a lot of that is actually also done by the franchisee, and they feed ideas into us. So a little bit of that work is done for us. Obviously, it's very important to have user insight, because data is no good unless it's kind of out of context, isn't it? You can draw a conclusion from the data, but unless someone really also gives you some context to it, you could very easily draw the wrong conclusion or come up with the wrong solution based on what you've seen in the data. So we do try to combine as much as possible, qualitative and quantitative. But like I said, it's not always the easiest thing to do.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you can always make mistakes reading data, and customers, again, you can't just take it at face value. Customers never really tell you exactly what they want.
No.
Or they tell you what they think they want, and then when you release that, they go, well, actually, no, we don't like this at all.
Yeah.
Why did you do this? Or, it's, I guess with Pizza Hut, it might be, you could do a survey on social media or something, and everyone would be like, yeah, we want this sort of pizza. We want I don't know.
Prawn and banana.
Yeah, like a banana stuffed crust or something. And everyone goes, actually, that could be amazing. Or peanut butter stuffed crust. Probably a little bit more realistic, I guess. And everyone goes, that's amazing. It gets released on the site, and everyone goes, this is awful. Why have Pizza Hut done this? It was a terrible idea. And it's like, well, it came from the customers.
Yeah, that's true. So actually, you make a good point around the menu sort of stuff. Unfortunately, I'd love to get more involved with working out what it is that customers want from the food standpoint, but that's all handled by each of the markets, because they all have their own menus. And I actually think that the menu differentiation across all the different markets is a really good analogy for e-commerce. If you think about it, if you go to Japan or Malaysia, they're going to have very local, very specific pizza toppings that you wouldn't find in the UK, for example. You got a lot of meaty bacon products on the UK, and if you go to India, a lot of it's vegetarian. So in many ways, the menus are optimized for the local markets. But I just said earlier that the online experience, we try to keep it as consistent and scalable as possible. So if we were to roll out testing programs in each of the individual markets for their customers specifically, then we'd probably end up with a similar situation to the menus, but in the online experience, where it's completely different everywhere you go. And that's something that because we are trying to create a consistent online brand around the world, that we have to kind of try to avoid doing, even though realistically from a CRO standpoint, that might be the best thing to do.
Yeah, definitely. I think when we first met, when you did a presentation, I think you mentioned something about there was a giant cookie that worked particularly well as an upsell or something.
Nutella breadsticks?
Yeah, it might have been that.
Yeah, exactly. So we did a in-basket upsell. So customers have already added all the items to their basket. They've headed to the checkout, and now we want to, I guess, prompt them to make a last-minute purchase of something in the basket. And one of those items that we tested in, I think it was now in France from memory, was a Nutella breadstick, and that's not something we have on the menu in the UK. So what we were really testing here was the experience, but we were limited by what was actually available in that market menu. So, that kind of creates a bit of a bias in your results when you don't have the same menu to test, but you're just trying to test an experience by prompting a menu item. When
you're deciding whether a test has worked or not, or is successful, what are the kind of main metrics that you're looking at for that? Is it average order values? Are you maybe sometimes looking at getting more orders through? Or does it vary?
Yeah. So each test will have, okay, so basically any test will have a hypothesis about what the expected outcome is. So let's say we want to test a color of a button, green or red, right? And what you want to happen is currently the button is red. We think that a green button is going to encourage more people to click on this and progress through the funnel than currently is the case. So we have a control which is red, and we run a variant which is green, and then we see that the people who have clicked the green button go on to purchase more product or go on to convert at a higher rate than the people who are presented with the red option. So we will actually break this down into multiple steps so that we can actually understand what's going on. So essentially, this could even be something that happens on the front page, on the home page or the landing page, wherever the customer has arrived. The first thing is a step conversion. So has the number of people who have clicked that button increased, or has it not? Now, obviously, just clicking a button is not going to necessarily improve transactions. It's not necessarily going to drive more value. But what we want to happen is for people to move beyond this step in the funnel by making the button green. Has that happened? If that has happened, then that's the step conversion result. Then we've improved the click-through rate for that button. Now we'll go and look at conversion or the basket size. So essentially each test will be either a conversion test or a basket size test, and we have a different way of measuring those results in the end statistically to determine whether or not we've improved conversion or we've improved order values. So no test will necessarily be both, but if we do drive value and conversion at the same time, then that's a really good outcome. But yeah, so I think that we look at micro conversions throughout the entire experience, that those customers who are subject to the variant or control, what their click-through rates are, what their progression is, and don't just look at the broader picture of more sales or more revenue.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it makes sense. So you break it down into the micro conversions. You can say, well, yeah, we know this button generated 10% more clicks, but it's maybe the actual conversion rate at the end of the journey was lower. So
yes, exactly, and that, yeah.
So it's like using, maybe a button color is not the best example for this, but where you use certain imagery and copy, it improves the click through. For an ad, for example, is probably a better example. You can get people to click through ads more, at a better rate by improving the copy, improving the image, making it really appealing. But then when you look at the conversions and you go, well, actually fewer people are converting on this, and you realize that all you've kind of done is manipulate people into clicking and getting that first click.
But not encourage them to buy.
Yeah, and they, might not be the product they want or anything. In fact, this reminds me of some adverts I've seen recently for mobile games, where the advert has been a completely different game experience to the actual game.
That's not going to, So
they'll be looking at their metrics, and they're probably going, our CPIs are incredible. These adverts are performing really, really well. When they actually look at the game performance, they're like, well, people play the game like once and then they disappear.
Yeah, that's a total vanity metric.
Yeah, and if you're not considering that whole kind of customer journey, looking at, from step A to step Z or whatever, you kind of miss out. You miss out on that, and you don't realize that what you're doing at one end of the funnel is just throwing away money, basically.
Absolutely, and I think I touched on iteration earlier on. One of the benefits of making sure that you look at the micro conversions towards through each variant, it allows you to devise your next test. If you just look at the overall picture of value and transactions, and then you realize that this didn't go the way that we thought it did, unless you understand how the behavior has changed in the variant more holistically, you're not really going to understand what's best to do next. You might kind of throw your hands up in the air and say, well, that didn't work. What do we do now? But if you can kind of if you improve the click-through rate with that color change, for example, then maybe there's something in the next step in the funnel where you can say, maybe now we see that they're not clicking through on this new button or this new menu item or whatever, and you can start to devise more and more tests.
Yeah, so I suppose in the example of the upsell, actually, you might find loads of people click on that upsell and add it to their basket. but then the conversion rate drops, and you might actually see that, you go, well, that, fantastic result at first. Loads of people are adding this item to the basket, successful test. Then you look at the conversion rate and you realize conversion's dropped. And it might be because the pricing wasn't too clear at the upsell stage.
Exactly.
So they've clicked through to their basket and they've gone, hang on a minute, it's now like twice the cost that I was expecting to pay. And that's what caused them to drop off. And if the customer can't make that link either, they don't think, I'll just take off that upsell. They suddenly think the whole order that I do want is now too expensive.
Exactly. Don't make the customer think.
Yeah. For companies who are quite new to CRO and testing, what are some key things that you think they should consider, right at the start?
Okay. Well, probably the most important thing to have in place is your measurement. So there's no point in testing something if you don't really know where you currently sit with your analytics. So having a robust measurement and analytics program in place, I think, is the most important thing to first of all address. I think that there's a lot of sexiness around A/B testing and CRO and so forth, but unless you're already in a place where you're confident that you've got reliable measurement and analytics in place, I wouldn't jump too headlong into CRO and testing. So that would be the first thing to take care of. Another point that I'm very guilty of myself, and I'm quite interested in improving in my own thinking, is I think that a lot of people, when they begin to understand their own website, when they look at the funnel, they look at the traffic that they're getting, they look at where it moves through the various steps in the funnel towards the checkout and transactions, it can be very tempting to address problems that are very early on in the funnel, right? So that's going to be the place that in your entire journey that you see the largest percentage of traffic dropping off. And therefore, that if you fix the problem there, the thinking goes, if you fix a problem there, that you're going to have more people moving through the funnel and you're going to have a higher conversion rate. Now, that might be true, but also the people who are having problems later on in your funnel, who are not getting through to transact and perhaps through the checkout and these sorts of areas, those customers are a lot more dedicated to finishing their transaction and buying from you than probably the majority of people landing on the homepage, right? So I would try and first of all get a pretty holistic understanding of where your drop-offs are throughout the funnel, but then try and maybe support those customers who are getting quite far through your funnel but then dropping off. Try and find out why they're having problems, because no matter how much you improve the step conversion of the majority of traffic coming through, this problem that sits late in the funnel is going to affect everybody unless you address it. So I would, in a sense, work, not always, but sometimes just work backwards from the problems that are affecting your most progressed customers.
Yeah, definitely. I think if you've got people with products in their baskets and they're not converting, if you can improve conversion rate, on the actual checkout stage, that's going to give you money because there are people there ready to spend. Whereas if you focus on really top end of the funnel, people who've just clicked on an ad or just landed on your website, they might, if you're trying to focus on getting them to actually view a pizza or view an item of clothing, at that stage, you still don't really know what that customer's there for.
Exactly.
They might, you don't necessarily, you can obviously track through different channels and things, but it's difficult to really think, once all these people are on the homepage, what are they trying to do at this stage? And so what is the next optimization to make? Whereas, if you go through to actual product pages and improve the add to basket, and then improve the go to checkout, and then improve checkout completion, those are bits that straight away are going to generate you money. Whereas if you're driving really bad traffic, no amount of optimization at that end of the funnel is going to make much difference.
Absolutely. And you can see where the temptation will lie. If you're losing 80% of the sessions on the first page, then you're going to think, then I have a massive problem right here. I need to address this. I need to get customers looking at product sooner and get them past the landing pages and into later stages of the funnel. But as you just reiterated, that's not always going to be the case, and you don't necessarily understand those customers particularly well either at that point. You're much better off focusing on those customers who have matured through your funnel and are close to transacting, but for some reason are having problems doing so. Focus on them first.
Yeah, I mean, I know it's obviously not this black and white, but you could argue that people on the homepage who have done nothing are possibly there because of a result of poor advertising, poor marketing. Whereas people who have clicked on a product, they've added a product to a basket, if they're not converting then it's a case of it's a bad web experience. Obviously, it's not quite like that. People change their mind. People look at prices and go, well, actually, maybe I'll go to this other site because I know they've got a discount. But it's kind of one way to help, I guess, people look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. Encouraging those people who have spent a little bit more time on your page than those who have just come along, I guess, is the underlying message there.
Yeah, it's similar to using pop-ups and things. If you get loads of websites will put a pop-up in front of you pretty much as soon as you've landed on the site. You'll be like, sign up and we'll give you 10% off. Sign up to our newsletter, we'll give you 10% off. And at that stage, you've got no idea about what that, you might not know what the site is, might be your first visit. Just by waiting 30 seconds to display that pop-up, if they're still on that site after 30 seconds, they probably are actually browsing a little bit. And you're probably much more likely to actually capture not only email addresses, but email addresses of people who are a little bit more engaged.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point.
Cool. So are there any common myths or misconceptions you see about CRO and testing?
Yeah, I often hear from certain teams and quarters that that there's sort of the site can be optimized, that you can get to a point whereby you're there's diminishing returns in CRO work, if you know what I mean by that. We have quite, without going into any numbers, we have a quite strong conversion rate on the majority of our sites, and it can be often it can be like, oh well, we have. It's pretty crazy to think that you can get a higher conversion rate than that, but it's not always just about conversion rate, as we talked about. It's also about value, and no site is ever fully optimized, or you never get to a point whereby there's no more work to do in CRO. There's always advancements in the technology. There's improvements to the experience that can be made, and there's always further and deeper understanding of your customers. Your customers as well are not static; they change over time. And they've come to expect more from your experience than perhaps you're currently offering. Particularly in our space, as you'd be aware, there's a lot of food aggregators. So I'm referring to Just Eat and Deliveroo, Uber Eats, and those guys are doing a fantastic job in their online experience. They have very big teams, and they do set the bar quite high for food ordering experiences. So while I believe we do well converting the traffic that we do get, our customers are constantly looking for improvements in the experience. And when you have such excellent competitors that are driving fantastic experiences and always striving to improve, they're 100% online focused, unlike us. We're also a restaurant business and a delivery business. That there's always going to be improvements that need to be made, and you're never at a point where you can sit on your laurels and say, okay, cool, that's the website done. Yeah, so just keep experimenting, keep looking for opportunities, keep listening to your customers, I think is a really important thing to do.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think there's always something you can come up with and kind of test, even if it's, because I think the problem a lot of people have is, especially if they're relatively new to CRO and testing, they do kind of view it as you're changing, the color of buttons, position of buttons, images, copy. Yeah. Those kind of tend to be the main things that get mentioned, when actually there's so much more to it. And I think this probably stems from people using A/B testing tools, which are front end, which work on the front. Yeah. And there's no actual development required. So when you really start to think about it, and you go, well, actually, maybe we want to test this, and suddenly you realize that there's development involved. And that's where I think there might be a bit of a gap there in people's understanding.
That's a very good point. Yeah.
And then maybe they don't view it as a testing thing. Maybe they think, well, actually, that's because we want to change the website, how the website is built and the structure of it. That's a product thing. That's not an A/B testing thing.
Yes, you're absolutely right. So when we do receive, as I mentioned earlier, ideas can come from anywhere, right? So if we're talking about a new piece of functionality on the site, there can be a kind of belief that, if we're going to invest this time and money in building this new tool or service on the site, that once it's done, it's going to be on the site. Now, while that might, to an extent, need to be the case because of the level of investment that's taken place in building that item, never is it going to be built right the first time. So testing has to be a part of that product roadmap. So just because you've got to have something on the site doesn't mean that you can't put that to your users and see what the experience is like and iterate on small parts of it, or even the whole part of it. Maybe the understanding beforehand was that this was going to be an improvement, that having this additional feature on the site was going to drive more transactions and sales. Why not test it? Keep some customers from not seeing it and let some other customers see it and see if holistically that improves things. Of course, I think that's a little bit of a sledgehammer approach to testing. It should be actually more about the finite, smaller details of the new feature that you're doing and trying to optimize that feature for your customers. But also as well, why not just see whether or not that feature has done anything for you?
Yeah, definitely. There's always change. Like, people want to make changes to their websites. They go, we need to rebuild the sign up process or something. We don't think that's working as well as we wanted it to. We want to add in, postcode lookup, email verification. We want to give people the chance to pick a welcome offer or something, promotion that they can use on their first purchase. And I think a lot of businesses go, that's what we want to do for our, version 2 of our website or version 3, whatever. That's what we're going to build and put it in place.
Let's just turn it on.
And it kind of, because it goes into the product side of the business first and the product and development side, they don't think like marketers really. And they don't think, well, maybe we should test this. It's just kind of, that's the next thing. It just goes into their roadmap. Yeah,
exactly. The other thing is you can often have a relationship concern to manage when, let's say, a particular team, maybe a non-tech team, has asked for something to be done on the site, and then you turn around and say, yeah, that's all well and good, but we're actually going to have to test to see whether or not that's a positive addition to the service. And if you do test it and it doesn't necessarily, maybe it's a bad result for them, then they're not necessarily going to be your biggest fan, because you've just told them that the thing that they wanted on their site is hurting business.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, this is leading us into the next question, which was what are the big and common problems and mistakes you see in CRO strategies? And I think, I don't want to just rant and go on about all the stuff I've experienced in companies that I think is wrong. There's also stuff related to what we've just talked about, where there might be like a regulatory change or something in the industry. And so you have to put something up on your website. And that's another thing where people don't think to test it.
Yes.
If you're told you have to show terms and conditions, like full terms and conditions to everyone who clicks on this offer, as soon as they click it, it has to be available. And there are different ways of showing that. But then obviously the legal team gets involved and compliance team, and they say, well, it has to be done like this. So these are our options. And then you've got the CRO team going, yeah, but actually we think we can build it like this or like this. Can we test it?
So still have it, but have it in its best form.
Yeah, exactly. Rather than the kind of legal way, which is we've been told it has to be available straight away. There it is. Put it up on the screen.
Precisely.
It's kind of, I guess, what's happened with like cookie banners and things, and a lot of GDPR banners. It's like, this is a requirement. We're going to put this like front and center in the screen, and actually people still find them annoying, just like we did.
Yeah, they do. Yeah,
I don't know what was it, 10 years ago when the first cookie stuff happened. And so all sites put that little banner which just said, "We use cookies." Okay. And loads of people were like, well, it's just annoying. Like, we're just going to click OK, fine. And now with GDPR, it's like stepped up another level where people are still going, yeah, okay, click accept.
Yeah, exactly. You raise a really good point. Just because something has to be on the site doesn't mean that, well, first of all, what's the impact of it? So always measure. So just because something is mandatory and you have to have it doesn't mean you can't work out if it's doing you any harm. Not to say that you'll get anywhere in not having it with that evidence, but also the way that it's been built or designed might tickle the compliance boxes and legal boxes. But even if we want to continue to, fit the compliance rules, there's got to be ways to improve the look and feel, maybe the functionality of whatever the mandatory feature is. There's always ways to test that as well, and testing should not take a backseat to those things that you have to have on your site.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's kind of the end of my rant section. So yeah, back to you. What are those mistakes you see?
Probably one thing that I see come up quite often is bad site speed. Nothing, in my opinion, is more important to the user experience than having a site load quickly. Whenever a new feature is released or new images or something are added to the page, particularly if it's part of a test, then the variant versus the control. The variant might actually load a lot more slowly than the control does. So really keep that in mind, that if you're trying to improve the experience, that you don't actually, although you might have built a nicer user experience in the variants, have you impacted the site load speed, because that is always going to impact usability and impact conversion ultimately. So make sure that that's consistent wherever you can across your variants. That would be the biggest one, I think, in my opinion, from what I've seen happen in testing. Another one is, like I've mentioned about PHDV, we're in multiple different markets, and there are lots of different teams who have access to, say, our Google Analytics accounts or our databases, and they are looking at the site in parallel. Now, while our PHDV analytics team is centralized, our market teams also will look at something. And because we kind of work for a different company or a different business, there might not necessarily be a consistent approach to measuring in those different markets. So that problem could be present in large organizations whereby different departments or different divisions have got their own analytics people, their own marketing people looking at site performance and coming up with different conclusions, because they're not measuring things necessarily in the same way. So I think it's really important that you either centralize that effort to measure and analyze, so that everyone in that team is performing that work in the same way and you're getting the same results and you're consistent in the way that you look at things, or that you come up with a set of guidelines that everybody adheres to and you train people in how to do things in the same way, so that you can have some confidence that the level of measurement and interpretation of data is consistent. Because if you don't do that and then you run tests on it, you could be in a world of trouble.
Yep, definitely makes sense.
Yep. The other thing is, we probably spend our whole day staring at our MacBooks or PCs or whatever, and we're thinking about the user experience on the web. But all your customers on the web, maybe not. They could be on mobile and tablet. Keep that in mind, and always double down on your investigation and look at other devices.
Yeah, you're right. It's really easy to make the mistake of just looking over your site again and again on your laptop.
Yes.
And just forgetting that actually people might be browsing it on a phone or a tablet. And then you've also got to consider that people might browse it on one device and purchase on another. So
yes, that's true. Yeah, particularly with a lot of kind of organic and paid traffic will maybe look at their phone on their commute for a particular product, and then they'll purchase that item when they get to their desk or when they get home and get out their laptop. So you've got to make sure that you're optimizing the right feature for the right device or audience.
Yeah, definitely.
A big fan of simplicity in variants. So make sure that you're not changing too many things between your control and your variant. If you add in 3 or 4 different changes and call that variant 1, and then in variant 2 you've got 3 or 4 more different changes, then you're not going to know what change you made that's going to deliver the improved result. If you make 4 or 5 different changes and put that into a variant, you might get a better result from your variant. But what exactly was it in your variant that improved the outcome? Make one small change in each variant and make it as simple as possible so that you can honestly compare side by side against control what it was that delivered you with your result.
Yeah, definitely. I'm going to contradict that slightly, I guess. But
yeah.
In that, I think what you can do is a complete redesign. That can work as a test where you might be
Definitely.
I don't know, rebranding, or you're going down a completely different design route. You're not making 4 or 5 changes to the same page. You're literally going, we're going to scrap this page. We're going to do something completely new and different to see if people respond to a different, almost like a different brand or a different style of page.
I totally agree.
That's where you can do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. There's no point changing like the image, the headline, and the button.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome copy as well. Yeah.
Yeah, because you have no idea which one's actually driven the improvement. And also what you might not realize is that one of those things you've changed might actually be decreasing the conversion for a different user segment.
Yeah, precisely. In isolation, that might have been a bad change, but you don't know that because it's masked by the overall improvement of the full variant.
Yep.
Yeah,
exactly.
But I completely agree with your point about a completely different experience, and the same is true for a new feature, like a completely new feature. You can't just test a little bit of that new feature. You have to actually implement the entire feature and test it against either having it or not having it. So, what I was more referring to was when you're making minor changes on a site just to improve maybe the readability or the click-through rate.
Yeah, the kind of more traditional A/B testing, what your day-to-day A/B testing. Yeah.
Yep. Exactly.
So how do you think things are going to change, or do you think things will be changing in the next kind of 12 months in
they most definitely Yes, they most definitely will be. And if you'd asked me this question, I would have said the same thing 3 or 4 weeks ago, but I would have been less emphatic about it. Coronavirus and the lockdown is going to have an enormous impact on e-commerce, and will, in fact, actually, at the risk of sounding a bit callous, it's probably good news for people in our industry because organizations that are perhaps legacy or pre-internet or bricks and mortar businesses have had to shift to pretty much 100% online e-commerce in the recent weeks. And that's something that they probably saw on their horizon several years away, maybe even like 10, 20 years time, we'll be 100% online and we won't have stores anymore. But now they're actually there today, and they're going to have to adjust to that, because even though I think things will go back to a relative level of normalcy in the coming months, the number of people who have never purchased online before or are not in the habit of purchasing online have had to do that in this time. And now they are, for lack of a better word, converted, if you know what I mean.
Yep.
So the emphasis on online sales for companies that are legacy or bricks and mortar is only going to be increased massively in the coming years. One of the major changes that I see happening will be the not only on investment in their websites and on their tools, but investment in their people. I think that the in some organizations, and not ours, by the way, but some other organizations, the e-commerce experience is kind of a separate department. So you will have operations and you'll have the stores and etc. And then over here you'll have e-commerce. Where I see that changing is that e-commerce will now sit above everything. If all sales are through the internet, or if the vast majority of sales are on the website, then there's no point in treating e-commerce and your web assets as a kind of another department. It is your business. It has to be at the center. It has to sit above everything else. And I see that companies will start bringing in chief data officers. If they don't already have them, they'll start bringing in analytics officers into their executive teams and putting much more emphasis on the data that they capture and being able to interpret that data and make optimizations and improve their business from there.
Yeah, really all valid stuff. I think, over the next 12 months, the expectation would have been, regardless of coronavirus, the expectation would have been that e-commerce would keep growing, mobile commerce growing. But I think this has just been a massive shock to the system. And all those businesses who thought, we know we need to get to it, we're kind of working on it, but it's a 2-year plan, are probably panicking a little bit and going, right, we actually need to get this sorted. We've got to be, our business needs to be sustainable from the e-commerce side, not the bricks and mortar side.
Precisely. Yeah. They need to shift from the thinking that the e-commerce is another store to thinking that it's our only store. Yeah.
And I think,
or it's our flagship.
Yeah, exactly. That's best way of putting it, really. I know there's one of the shoe stores in the UK. They kind of have taken that approach, and particularly when it comes to things like delivery and click and collect. Mm-hmm. So now all the stock from every single store and all the warehouses and stuff is all linked up to the e-commerce site, so that when people put in their postcodes and get a delivery estimate, it's able to say, you can collect from this store, or you can have it delivered in like next day delivery for free, because we know we've got it really close to you. Or if you want it for free, it's going to be a 3 to 5 day delivery, because we know that the only stock of this is in our warehouse in like Scotland, and you're based in Kent or something.
That's one thing that's very important, is just managing those expectations with deliveries and how long people can expect to get them, because you are changing from whereby your customers probably walked into your store and picked it up on the same day. Maybe it only took them a few minutes to come in and get what they needed. Now the downside is obviously that last mile. So companies that nail that part of the user experience are going to do very well.
Yeah, especially when you consider if you're an international brand and you're considering delivery times. In the UK, I think we're getting very, very used to Amazon Prime's next day delivery, and a lot of other companies being able to deliver either next day or day after. But then when you think about the size of the UK, we're pretty tiny. Then you look at the US, and that speed is still, obviously Amazon is set up to do it pretty quickly. For a lot of companies, that it's going to be difficult, and you got to think, well, do you have warehouses in different places? How do you manage store stock? And it is more difficult. And I guess that's one consideration. If you're a brand that's like headquartered in one country and you're expanding into other countries, that's another thing you've got to consider. Like delivery times are not the same, and the expectations are different as well.
That's exactly right. So I'm from Australia, as you probably could have told, and I think we have a similar culturally, obviously, to the UK and the United States, but we're far less densely populated. And one thing that surprised me when I moved over to the UK was just the absolute speed at which you receive your deliveries. In Australia, a 2-week period is not a long time to have to wait for an online purchase to arrive at your house, and people are very much used to that. But if you told a British person that they had to wait 2 weeks for the delivery, they probably wouldn't buy from you.
Personally, I've got to that point with Prime now, where I'm like, I know it'll take me like an hour to get to the store, buy the thing I want, and come back, or I can have someone deliver it to me in 2 hours, and I'm kind of willing to wait that extra hour, but because I know I can get it so easily.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's definitely going to be probably one of the harder sides of e-commerce, I think, and I'm glad I'm not so much involved in it, because it would be it's a tricky logistics problem.
Yeah, but I mean, fortunately, I mean, I don't know exactly how it all works at Pizza Hut, but obviously the products are made at stores that have a certain delivery area. So
Yeah, exactly.
they should only be taking orders in that delivery area. Otherwise, something's possibly, hopefully just gone wrong, and they just have to sort it. But
that's the customer's location determines which store that they'll be ordering from. So that's always within the designated zone for that store.
Yeah, and so the only thing really to be worried about is, massive traffic issues, or I guess massive quantities of orders.
Yes, order volumes and driver availability. They're probably the main problems.
Which I would have thought for the most part is, kind of scheduled in. Like, you kind of know which days and which evenings are going to be, really busy periods, really quiet periods. But there's always those one-off incidents, and I guess stuff like coronavirus again has probably. I think it has had quite a big impact on food delivery.
Yes,
which
definitely.
A lot of businesses would just not have expected, and it's probably just raised the level every single day.
Yeah. So for us, we've shifted to 100% delivery and 100% online payments, whereas before it was largely that way, but it wasn't 100%. So that's actually increased the pressure that's now on the drivers and the driver availability. So it's been an interesting problem, and was one that was very difficult to kind of understand what the impact would be before it happened. Now that we're a few weeks into it, and we're kind of beginning to see new buying trends from customers, we're beginning to be able to predict a little bit better what we can expect from our peak times, which is usually Friday and Saturday evenings, and better equip the stores to know what they need to do in advance of that.
Yeah, now you've got the data, you can learn from it, and hopefully, well, not hopefully, but if this sort of thing does happen again, you'd be in a better position to probably tackle that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. So, have you got any pet peeves when it comes to marketing?
I do actually. I had to think about this earlier, and one thing I can't stand is when you go onto. It's usually on newspaper sites or news websites, and you get a billion pop-ups and ads dropping down and things encroaching on what you're trying to read, like the article you've looked up. And oftentimes they'll have a video at the top of the news article. And if I scroll down and it'll play automatically, which I also dislike. But if you scroll down to read the rest of the article, that video will now pop down to the bottom right corner and continue playing. Like, I've scrolled down. I don't want to see the video anymore. Go away. Just absolutely crowded experience. Just I have to click 5 or 6 different things before I can actually do what it is that I came there to do. And more often than not, I don't even bother reading the rest of the article. I'll go and look for that same bit of information on a different site, because I'm just so turned off by that experience.
Yeah, it's you're ruining the user experience by trying to put what they want in front of you. Even Precisely, though you've clicked through to read an article, and they're saying, yeah, but sign up for our newsletter and watch this video. And sometimes the video is not actually related, or not. It's not directly related to the article, but it might be related to the topic.
Yes, and they'll want to play you a 30-second car commercial as well before you see the video if it is related to the article. So
and at that stage, you can't even pause it and get rid of it, because if you click on it, you open up the ad instead.
All you can do is leave the site.
Yeah, I completely agree. I know that most days I do a search for Man United. I check the latest news for Man United, and I tend to open up like 10 tabs at once. I open up all the articles that I want to read, and then suddenly, my laptop's crashing because you've got all these videos and everything, and those ads on the side, all of that trying to load at once. And it's just super annoying. Yeah.
I definitely think there needs to be some better conversion rate optimization analytics going on there.
Yeah, definitely. And if you could kill off one particular marketing channel or tactic as a consumer, do you have one?
Not sure, actually.
I suppose arguably it would be that tactic of
Yeah, well,
hammering you with every pop-up you can.
At risk of repeating myself, yeah, that kind of pop-ups that get in the way of what you're there to do on the page, I think have got to be the most annoying way of getting traffic to your site. What are they called? The big banner ads and things like that just take up the entire screen, particularly on mobile.
Yeah, I can't remember. Splash.
Splash, yes, I absolutely hate them.
Yeah, especially I find it particularly annoying when it takes a little bit longer to load as well. So you've actually seen a little bit of the website you want to look at, you start scrolling, and then suddenly you're hit with a full page ad. That you might even click on accidentally then.
And all the click-throughs for that are converting at 0% because nobody's come. They'll come to your site and they're like, I did not mean to click that because it took up my entire screen. I was actually trying to close it, so I'm out of here. And so you've paid for the traffic, and now you're getting nothing out of it.
Yeah,
I don't understand it.
Yeah. Cool. Well, that's great stuff. Really, really interesting stuff about conversion optimization and testing. Been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast.
It's been a pleasure being on. Thank you.
So, as you heard, Pizza Hut is a great example of a business that has centralized the analytics and conversion element of their business and has a team dedicated to improving their online ordering experience. This team doesn't run advertisements. They're not really a marketing team. They just have free rein to test and optimize that website for conversion at the highest order values they can get. The key things you need to look out for if you're going to run conversion optimization are, number one, get your analytics and reporting set up correct. Obviously, you need to get everything tracked properly, but you also need to make sure they're tracked in the same way and with the same terminology across different countries or platforms, app versus website, for example. It's really surprising how many different definitions of CPL and CPA I see. Two, don't worry so much about top of the funnel, at least not initially. You might panic when you see 60% of your site visitors disappear without even viewing a product, but you actually want to look at those people who are abandoning your checkout first. The 10 or so percent of people who have added products to their baskets, got to the checkout page, and then something has scared them off before they finalize the purchase. Work on these guys to see immediate revenue and then work backwards up the funnel. Look at people who add products to baskets, then people who review products, then think about how you can get more people viewing products. Finally, you don't need to invest heavily in third-party tools. You should be able to get enough data through Google Analytics to identify your initial opportunities, and Google Optimize is free as well, so you can run your first tests without any investment at all, really. That's it for today. If you enjoyed the episode, please do rate the podcast, and you can subscribe on the Customers Who Click website for new episodes and all sorts of freebies and extra content I'll be giving away. If you've got any questions about conversion optimization, send them through to will@customerswhoclick.com and I'll get them answered for you. In the next episode, I'm speaking to Nick Truman at Spec Digital about SEO. But until then, keep those customers clicking.